today we are going to be talking about Hanami, one of
Yes.
my favorite festivals when I was living in Japan. So, Hanami, for anyone that doesn't know, is a Japanese holiday. It directly translates to flower viewing, and
Mhm.
it usually refers to cherry trees, which are known as sakura, but they sometimes also refer to plum trees, which are ume. And do you have fond memories of Hanami? Because I love it.
Well, I think the thing is, it's just one of those special times of year when you just see the changes. Like everywhere, you see the cherry trees and the blossoms all around the country. I mean, when I was very young, we lived in an area of Kyoto where there's a street called Tetsugaku no Michi,
Hmm.
and along there they have cherry trees the whole way along, and that blooms at this time of year. So that's a very special thing. You also, when I was living in Kobe, the thing is that they were on a valley, and on the opposite side of the valley there were cherry trees in amongst the woods, so you could see the cherry
Oh,
trees sort of like out against the trees there. So it was really really good.
that sounds
Um,
so pretty. I actually like realized I knew it when I was living there, and then I guess I forgot it. This is a whole episode of me remembering. um, but I remembered when I was doing research again, I looked up the area and I found out by doing a little extra research that the area I used to live near is actually like one of the top 100 Hanami spots. And I
that
didn't
right.
realize that. Yeah, I lived very close to Shukugawa Park. Um,
Mhm.
and I used to walk down that all the time. Like my parents and I would go for long walks. Sometimes if I missed the bus, I would bike all the way to one of the train
Yeah,
stations and then I would hop the train to get to school. So,
yeah.
and I realized later or like now I like remember that it was like one of the best spots for Hanami, and I just think that's so funny that it's like this is one of the top 100 spots for Hanami, and it was in my neighborhood.
Yeah, it's great. It's just right there.
It was
I,
great.
I yeah, because I also remember that the first school I went to, in well, one of the earliest schools that I went to in Japan, they had like cherry trees in the schoolyard, so you'd
Hmm.
have those would appear, and you thought, oh yeah, that's this time of year. Because I mean, sometimes it'd be so dense that it would be as if the thing had leaves on it. It would create that shade, but it would just be this tree
Just
just covered in
flower
blossoms.
petals.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah.
beautiful. If anyone hasn't been able to participate in a hanami or see a cherry tree, I absolutely recommend trying to do it if there is the ability to do
Yeah,
so. It is really just a wonderful experience, just the natural beauty of the tree. But it's also really fun in Japan. It's like one of the few times that people really like party in public. Because
yeah.
most of the time, Japanese people, it's a stereotype, but it is very true. Most Japanese people are quite reserved. They
Mm,
aren't very boisterous or loud. And Hanami was one of the few times where people would like, they were having fun in a very
yeah.
public space. And so the official period of Hanami is actually announced by the Weather Bureau, and there are many
Mhm.
people who like for certain offices or certain places of work, it is a holiday. Like people take off to go to Hanami and to view the flowers.
Yeah.
It's usually this big outdoor party where friends and family gather together beneath the sakura trees. And usually people celebrate well during the day, but some people will celebrate long into the night. Some people even camp
Yeah.
out so that they can hold their spot so that they can stay for multiple days in a row and celebrate with a fairly large amount of alcohol. And there's actually a specific term for doing hanami at night, and it's called yozakura, which is night
Mhm.
sakura, which I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I thought that was really cute.
Yeah, it's just interesting just having to look back on it and just like because I watched a few videos and stuff like that, and it's like the sort of like advice for people who want to go. It's sort of things like make sure you take a tarpaulin or something like that. Make sure you get there early in order to make sure you get a good space.
Mm-hmm.
Sort out your meeting times and everything like that because it's going to be busy.
Oh
It's
yeah,
one of those festivals that is
it
very
gets
busy.
so crowded,
Mm.
but it's really
It's
fun. What most people will do, there are some places where they'll build like temporary food stalls where they'll sell like a lot of Japanese street food, like yakisoba, or they'll
mhm.
sell like these pastries that are filled with red bean paste, the ones that look like fish. I love those. Um, and then there will be also like stalls for kids where like you could fish, you could try and like catch some fish, you can try and like win prizes. So it's like a very mini fair, at least the one that
Yes.
when I lived near Shukugawa, they did that every year and it was lots of fun. But actually, a lot of people bring their own food, and it's actually very
Yes.
traditional to do so because people will pack these multi-level bento boxes that they share with everyone during Hanami. And it's actually a really big part of it is the sharing of food, the sharing of alcohol, and like the sharing of the experience of watching the flowers.
Yep, it's definitely one of those things, and there's just all like special foods that come out for that particular time of year as well. So was it Kit Kats that are flavored to be like sakura and all that sort of
Hmm.
stuff. It's just interesting that it's so specific that we've got Kit Kats for this. It's this important. It's not only have we
Yeah.
got a Kit Kat, it's not just shaped like a flower. We've got like, where it's a really taste of the thing as well. They go all in. And it's one of those things. Is a lot of like Japanese sweets. If you go for like sort of like higher end stuff, sometimes a bit sort of fancy. They do have the ones that are flavored like that with the anko in the middle and all that sort of stuff. And it's really sort of a special thing even outside of that particular time period. It's a really special thing. It's a flower that just seems to be very important in Japanese thought processes and things like that. Because I suppose it is associated with the kind of rebirth sort of thing and spring,
Hmm.
and it's spectacular. I mean, it, you really see it happening
It's
because
it's
it's the
all
only
at
color you've
once.
got. Yeah.
I think that's the thing that's so beautiful about Hanami is the fact that it's with spring it feels like it happens fairly gradually and you see a couple flowers
Mm-hmm.
start to show up and then a couple more. Hanami is like at once within like a 2 day period all the flowers are blooming. You have
Mm-hmm.
them for about a week and then they're all gone. And it's just like
Yeah.
it's super distinct. You know when Hanami is happening, you see them everywhere and then they're gone. But then because there are sakura trees that are bred just for the flowers, just like there are sakura
Mm-hmm.
trees that are bred just for the cherries. So most of the ones that have these spectacular blooms, they don't really produce any fruit. Um,
Mm.
but they are gorgeous trees. And actually,
Yes.
one of the things I found for the food, which I thought was really interesting, is that there is a specific type of dango that is made for hanami called hanami dango. Dango is a sweet rice cake, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
mochi, but it has already sweetness in the rice cake, whereas mochi
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the mochi itself is fairly plain. It's what's inside that gives it the
Yeah.
flavor. And hanami dango is very specific because it has 3 balls of sweet rice cakes. The top one is white, the middle one is pink, and the bottom one is green. And
Yeah.
it's very specific because those are the colors of the flower of the white and the
Yes.
pink, and then the green for the leaf. And a lot of the times it's you could eat it by itself if you wanted to. It's sometimes also served with this like brown sugar syrupy thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
really good. I remember the first time it was offered to me, I was like, that looks savory. It looked savory to
Yes.
me. So when I actually ate it and it was sweet, I was like, oh, this is a very weird experience.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've had that. I mean, it's one of those things that you just kind of get reminded of. You just go, "It's good. I really miss it," because it's so specifically Japanese. It's just quintessentially Japanese. You just kind of think, "Oh my god," it doesn't. It doesn't. There's nothing else like it elsewhere.
No, not really.
It's.
And sometimes for Hanami, because there's so many levels to the bento boxes and like what people provide for their friends, people will do like onigiri or they'll make chirashi, which is a bed of rice and then a bunch
Mhm.
of different fish on it, fish eggs, actual egg, like pancakes that have been chopped up. It's a whole dish and it's absolutely delicious. Some people will make like these special rolls, negi, that are really good. And there's just a lot of different foods that are available that are portable that last for a long time. Because that's the idea
Mm.
is you're going to be celebrating all day. And you'll
Yes.
take turns, like some people will leave, they'll come back, but there's always like a fairly large group all sharing sake. That's actually very big to share during Hanami is to actually have
Mhm.
sake. I think more and more people have been, bringing in beer and wine, but I think most traditional is to have sake during Hanami. And people
Yes.
get like rip roaring drunk. Like that was one of the like other than going out late at night in like the Sannomiya area, which was like kind of one of the major like hubs in Kobe.
Yes.
Um, when I was living in Japan, the only times we really saw people like drunk, publicly drunk, would be the people who would work, the businessmen who would go out, drink, and then they would go home, or everyone would be drunk during Hanami. And
Yeah.
it was so strange because it was like during the day, people were outside and it was everyone, women, older men, like not children, but like people were like drunk and clearly having fun. It was really
Yes.
it was so different because most of the time in Japan, it felt like everyone was quite reserved and very much like focusing on themselves and
Mm.
um, themselves and others. Like, how do I interact with others in this world? And Hanami felt like one of those few times where it was like, we're having fun. This is like, we can
Yeah.
just have fun right now. That's all that
You just let your hair
matters.
down. It's all right. It's it's such an amazing thing. I mean, it's difficult to like kind of convey it without pictures of like how impressive it is. I mean, particularly in big cities, there are a lot of places. I mean, Kyoto's always going to have stuff because I mean that city is so ancient and has been the capital for so long,
Mm-hmm.
or was the capital for such a long time. There are so many places in Kyoto that you can kind of go to and see these trees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they are everywhere because it's so important as an idea. Um, and especially if you're talking about Tetsugaku no Michi, you can just walk down that, and it is several kilometers of this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just
It's very
and they're
much
all
like
there.
Shukugawa.
Yeah.
It's kilometer like you are walking and it is nothing but sakura flowers. It's so pretty.
Yeah.
Um, I actually was interested in when it kind of started, just
Mhm.
because it feels like it's been around for a long time, and that's because it has. Um, it started in the Nara period, which would have been around
Okay.
710 to 794. Um,
Yeah.
but it was specifically at the time dedicated to the ume blossom, which, as I mentioned, is the
Mhm.
plum tree. And it was over time that it shifted over more towards the sakura tree, and that was
Mhm.
within the Heian period, which is more like
Right.
794 till 1185. And that was the
Mhm.
one that really made it that Hanami became synonymous with Sakura. So over time, it actually came to the point where flowers were called Sakura. Like if you use the
Yeah.
term flower, you were referring to a Sakura flower. Um,
Mhm.
and especially in poetry, so like in waka or in haiku, that was what would be used. Would they would say the term flower, but it was always in your mind you were describing a sakura
Yeah.
flower.
Sakura. Yeah. Well, this is just what's fun point is that the Nara period. Obviously, Nara used to be the capital of Japan until it shifted a couple of times before it actually ended up in Kyoto. But I think there were a couple of rapid shifts of capital. So if you're going back that far, it's very early. That's sort of like when you first start getting Buddhism moving in, and it's when you start. You still have the emperors, you don't have the shoguns yet, and that kind of thing. So it's very early. It's very early. Um, in terms, I mean, yeah, it's well over 1,000 years, but I mean, in terms of Japanese history, the Nara period is when people start going, yeah, this is when things really sort of became where you can sort of see something. You kind of go, yeah, this is Japan as we kind of understand it in a more modern context. So
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like looking back over the history. So it's interesting that it's lasted that long. I mean, I don't know of any. I suppose there are European traditions, but they tend to be pan-European rather than sort of like special traditions for locals
And a lot of
or a
the times
local
they're also
kingdom.
tied to religion, whereas
Mm,
Hanami is not religious. It's it's more of a celebration of the sakura tree. It is a
yeah,
celebration of the beauty, of the ephemera. Part of the reason why it is such a big deal is the fact that they don't last long. So in a way,
yeah,
you're celebrating such a limited, special thing that you only get to see for a very short amount of time. So you should enjoy that beauty because soon it's going to be gone. I think that's such a powerful philosophy to kind of center an entire holiday around is celebrating the ephemera of nature. It's
mm,
fascinating. I loved it so much when I lived there. There was always something that to me felt very interesting because around Hanami, like you said, you start seeing all these foods that start popping up that are all sakura
yeah,
flowers. They're all pink, or they have that very artificial kind of like flowery sakura taste, which I personally love. It's a
yeah.
flavor that I absolutely adore, and you cannot get it here in the States. You can get it if you order it from
No,
Japan.
Yeah,
but you're not going to get it naturally here in the US. And it's something that once in a while, when I do get to taste it, it makes me feel at home. Just kind of like
yeah,
matcha. Anytime I taste matcha, it makes me
yeah.
feel a little more at home.
It's such a difficult thing to describe that taste because I mean the thing is that it's very light taste. It's
Hmm.
not. It, it's it's a strange one because it is very sweet, but it's a subtle light taste.
It's flowery.
It's a
That's one of the
yeah,
best ways to describe it. It tastes like you think a flower would taste.
yeah. I suppose the closest thing you could kind of get in terms of taste in the West might be rose water, but even that doesn't really taste like it. It is
Yeah.
different.
No, it's even
It's the
more
only
subtle than that. Rosewater can be very
yeah,
powerful. Sakura is
yeah,
very faint and very mild. Um, but it is lovely. It's a great flavor. I'll be honest,
yeah.
doing the research into this and thinking back on it, a lot of this episode was just me thinking of when I was living in Japan and how much I missed it and
Mm,
how much I
yeah,
missed spending time with friends and getting to be a part of something that I knew I was never going to be 100% involved in because as a foreigner I was
yeah.
always going to stand out. But there was something that I always appreciated about being able to participate even at a distance in something that meant so much. Like you could tell that Hanami meant a lot to people.
Yeah, I think it just is kind of because I kind of said earlier because it is so quintessentially Japanese. There's just as soon as you start seeing the pictures and as soon as you start seeing the images, you just go, yeah, I remember that.
Hmm.
And it's such a special event, and because it's so dramatic and because it's so brief, it really sticks with you as something that feels special. I mean, I can't think of anything else in Britain or that that you would think of where somebody or a group of people would be so interested in a particular flower at a particular time of year. I think the only time that people start talking about this sort of thing is when they talk about the bluebell wood.
Hmm.
It's just, and but people don't go out to look at it. I
They
think
just
the
notice
only
them.
I think yeah. I suppose people must go out to look at it, but I mean, like they don't do it in the way that you would do it for Hanami. You just wouldn't. It doesn't have that cultural sensation in a sense. The only other thing I can think of that I've heard of in Britain is looking at daffodils in the Lake District because of Wordsworth's poem. That's about
Right.
as close as somebody goes to look at this thing that a poet wrote about. About 200-300 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
but
the closest that it comes.
they're not like camping out overnight to go look at the daffodils, are they?
No, 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 they're not. I mean, and you're not going to be sitting there. You might have a picnic there, but you're not going to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people doing it. It's a
Hmm.
really big event, and it is for everybody, which is the other nice thing. And as I say, it is everywhere. I mean, it's difficult to stress how important these trees tend to be. They are everywhere. I mean, you just like looking at some of the pictures of like some of the old castles and things like, oh, it's like a castle. They've got them there. They've got them at Himeji. Um, they must have them at the Gosho, which is in Kyoto. Um, I don't know if they have them at Nijo Castle in Kyoto, but they probably do. I would be surprised if they didn't because it was the shoguns. It was the shoguns' living quarters. The shoguns used to be sort of like the warlords of
Yeah,
Japan.
I think they would have
So they,
if they don't have a large number of them, they definitely have a few.
yeah, definitely. It's it's just one of those things. I don't know. It's such a sort of odd particular thing, and it's just for this one plant at this one time of year. Well, not one plant. I'm obviously got urban as well, but it's it's just the nostalgia of it. It just gets to you, doesn't it? You can't quite articulate what it's like.
I just always remember it making me very happy seeing so
Mm,
many people like outside and celebrating. Um, it kind of, in a way, relates to me with like Mardi Gras, where it's that idea of
mm,
celebrating, having fun, being together as a community. But Mardi Gras is even more raucous and wild, whereas I feel like Hanami is still quite subdued. But it's still an excuse for people to come together and celebrate and have a really good
yes.
time, even within a public space. Whereas I feel like a lot of the times when we celebrate, it's very internalized. It
Mm,
definitely in Japan, a lot of the times celebrations were quite internal, but this was one of the few times where it was like in public, a celebration, really, really fun and big and loud.
yeah.
Well, as loud as you can be without like blasting music and having a parade. It was just like people sitting on the side of the river or underneath the sakura trees and drinking and eating
Mm.
food. Sounds like a great time. And actually, I think what's so interesting with the sakura tree is that it is a huge symbol for Japan. It has a lot of
Mm.
meaning and impact on the culture. And I mean, that's really clear with the fact that after World War II, Japan actually gifted the United States with sakura trees. Um,
That makes sense.
and they got planted within Washington, D.C. And actually,
Hmm.
D.C. has a fairly large hanami that they do every year when the sakura trees
Okay.
bloom as well. There's also like a Japanese population that's there. We have a
Yes.
small hanami that happens here in Buffalo. We only
Oh,
have
that's pretty
like
cool.
a couple of trees and they
Mm.
try so hard. And it's not as like intensive as hanami is in Japan, but it is an
No.
excuse for the local Japanese community, which isn't very big, to come together and recognize that they are a community here in the Buffalo area.
Yeah. I suppose it's not going to do so well in Buffalo because the weather's a bit colder, isn't it? I mean, because you think of like the sort of time when it happens in Japan. The thing is that you got to remember the temperature tends to be a bit warmer than it would be in somewhere like near the UK or the US, well, the northern United States at this time of year.
Mhm.
It's it's a temperature where you can go out and not worry about being cold.
Yeah.
It, it it's an interesting one because it I'm pretty sure you would end up your jackets and everything like that would be gone by the time it got to that time of year. You would be like, no, we don't
Oh,
need
for
them.
sure.
It's going to be too hot. It's that kind of thing. It's and you got the bright sunlight. The days are reasonably long, and the weather's not generally that bad at that time of year either. I mean, it's before the rainy season, and it's not too hot. It's not like the high summer or anything like that. It's pleasantly warm.
Yeah, I remember
It's
Hanami always being really nice, like weather-wise.
yes,
Like I don't remember a Hanami when I lived there where it rained. I remember like the full week being just lovely. Like
yeah,
mild weather, sunshine, maybe
mm,
cloudy, but really like not rain.
yeah. I don't remember actually ever. I mean, that's the thing is maybe I'm sort of slightly rose tinted thing of going, yeah, I remember them trees. This is that you can't. You, it's that's it's that sort of thing. It's just very difficult to remember anything at that time of it being wet or anything like that.
Hmm.
It's a really nice time of year. Spring in Japan is really really nice, and I think that's probably partly why the tradition sort of appears because you've got these, again, sort of like the rebirth thing. It's really quite important in a certain sense. I mean, even one of the most famous songs to come out of Japan is that song Sakura,
Hmm. Yep.
and it's quite a famous one. It's like I think you can find it on YouTube if you want to, but it's all about the sakura trees and that kind of thing, played on a koto, so a very Japanese instrument. And I
Yes.
think I remember once being taught to play it on a koto. And the interesting thing about that sort of thing is that what they do is they kind of give you what they call tabs. So basically, the strings are numbered. So you
Hmm.
just got to remember which numbered string to play at a certain time, and that gives you the melody and everything like that.
Hmm.
And it's an interestingly simple melody, but it's very very recognizable.
You play so many instruments.
And it was only this one day where they just were showing us how to do it, and that was the song that they taught us. Because it kind of like shows you how, I mean, because it's quite simple, but I think the thing is that maybe that's part of the reason is because it's such an important time of year and such an important event that these tunes and things like that. It's a folk tune, I suppose. I need to, it's that kind of thing. I don't know how old the song is actually, because these things do appear in art and literature all over the place. They appear in the tale of Genji in terms of like talking about Sakura. Um, you see it as an image in all sorts of Japanese stuff as well. So like, you know, on clothing, um, on food and stuff like that. It's everywhere.
Hmm.
It's such an it's because
I'm
like
trying
people
to
have like national
see.
plants, but like like you don't see it that often. I suppose the only other people that you kind of notice everybody knows about is shamrocks from Ireland. It's the only kind of thing I could think of that's comparable in terms of yes, that's what we
I was gonna say
associate that
probably
with.
the closest would be like shamrocks, like people looking out for shamrocks and stuff
Mm,
like that. I looked up the
yeah.
song it's actually called Sakura Sakura, and it was a
Hmm.
popular urban melody in the Edo period.
Oh, okay. So reasonably old.
Ye- It says it's been popular since the Meiji period, but it was a popular urban melody in the Edo period.
Okay. So it's not actually a court one. That's interesting. If it's urban, then it's not
Hmm.
going to been written by courtiers and kind of yeah, these are the people. This is who it's for. Because I mean, that's always the thing with these things is you always have the courts. So I'm assuming that they would be the ones that would have been in charge of making sure. I mean, I'm assuming don't and believe at first they were the ones who had all the plans, so they could actually kind of it was for them at first, and then I suppose that's how you kind of show your power, though, isn't it? You kind of go, yeah, we can give this to all of you now. So
Yeah, I
it's a
guess
good way of doing things.
I'm not sure how like it developed over time. I'm just really grateful that it is what it is now because I
Yes.
got to enjoy it when I lived there. I just have very, very fond memories of Hanami because it also meant that we were getting close to the summer months, so it was going to start getting warm
Hmm.
again, and it was already warm by the time Hanami rolled
Yeah.
around. Um, it was an excuse to be outside, to hang out with friends. I know that
Yes.
during the period of Hanami, we there were very famously groups of kids from our high school who would go actually near my house who would go to the Shukugawa River, the Shukugawa area, and they would
Yeah.
camp out underneath the flowers. And there are many stories of some of the kids that we went to high school with getting riotously drunk. Keep in mind, in Japan, you can drink at the age of 18, just letting you know. And they would get riotously drunk. I know there was at least a story of one student falling into the river, if not.
Oh, great.
Yeah, there was one who fell into the river and then another one who went after him to help him. This is also a river that's like maybe a foot deep. It is not a deep river,
Okay.
but it was more like embarrassing that he fell in. Um,
And then needed help to get out.
yes.
Oh God. That must have been brilliant to see. Just like dragging that. Come on.
I know I wasn't there, but I do remember multiple years like walking down the river and then I would see kids from school and our school wasn't big.
Hmm.
Like every grade was like maybe 50 students. So we all kind of knew each other, especially the high school and middle school. We we were basically all in the same hallway. So even if you didn't talk to each
Yes.
other, you knew each other. And actually most of my friends were a lot older than me, so I remember going
Hmm.
down the Shukugawa River and I like saw people that I was friends with at school and I was like, "Hi guys." And they would be drunk, having a great time under the sakura flowers and I was like, "I'm going to keep walking with my family, but it's lovely to see you all."
Yeah. Just make sure you get home safe.
Exactly. But that's also the thing that I think is so great with Japan is there is such a safe public transportation system that
Yes.
there's not as much of a worry with drinking and driving. I know there is still that issue and it absolutely is
Mm.
really terrible. People should not be doing that. But I think it's a lot more reduced in Japan because the public transportation is so safe and it's not that expensive
Yes.
that people can just like get rip roaring drunk and then they can just hop on the train and go home and walk it off. Like
Yes.
there's a lot more of an understanding of as a group we need to take care of each other. So if I'm drunk, I'm not going to drive. I'm going to take
Hmm.
the train. I'm going to walk home. I'm going to take my bike. Don't bike drunk. That sounds like a terrible idea. But there are definitely ways around doing that without having to drive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, that is the good thing about it. It's basically with the public transport in Japan, you're going to get anywhere pretty easily most of the time if you're in a big city. It's
Hmm.
not too difficult. There's not going to be too much walking involved. So, and generally speaking, Japan is very safe, comparatively speaking. I mean, that's not to say that bad things don't happen, but I mean, you are generally speaking going to be okay.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
yeah.
I was a young woman living in Japan, and very frequently I would be coming home late because of rehearsals, or I would be out visiting a friend. I would get home 10, 11 o'clock. I never, ever, ever worried about my safety. That changed
No,
very
yeah.
quickly for me when I moved to France, when I was living in
Yeah.
Paris. But living in Japan was incredibly safe. I honestly
Mm.
never felt worried about my physical self. I always felt
Yeah.
like I was going to be taken care of, or not even going to be touched or bothered.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the one time we had someone come up and bother us was actually around the Hanami period. My
Mm.
mom and I were on the train. We were going on the train home, and I remember this guy who was kind of drunk coming up to
Yeah.
us, and he like bowed and was kind of talking, and then this totally random dude, definitely didn't know this guy, walked up to him, like bowed super apologetically to my mom, and I was like profusely saying sorry, and then like gently guided this drunk man away from us and sat him down, and you could tell he was like kind
Yeah.
of chastising him, and we are like, it's fine, like he was just chatting, he wasn't being mean or like rude, but there was still this element of like, oh, we're being taken care of, like they're watching over
Yes.
us.
Yes.
I think it helped that we're foreigners. We were foreign women.
Maybe there is that.
But there was still that element of like, we got you. You'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, is this? I don't remember ever having any problems like that. I mean, even around Hanami, I don't remember having problems like that. To be fair, uh, it's unusual. I mean, it probably happens more than we think it does. But I mean, it's you don't get the impression that it happens as much as. I mean, you're not going to get catcalled or anything like that in Japan in the same way as you would in Britain or elsewhere.
I never got catcalled until I moved to France.
Mm,
And the first time it happened, I was so shocked that I didn't know what to do. And thankfully, I was with my best friend, and she just like gently pulled me away and like was like,
hmm.
ignore him, we'll keep walking. But it was so shocking to me. Like it had
Yeah.
just never happened to me. And so all of a sudden, getting catcalled, and it was like, oh, what is this? Like, I hate this. Whatever this is, I don't like
Yeah.
it. And I was very lucky. I was very privileged living in a country where I felt so safe. So suddenly living in a country was like, you do have to watch out for yourself a little more, was a little bit of a rude awakening, but also like I should have known. Like I should have known better and been aware.
Well, well, I don't know. That's what they all say. But I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, if you grow up in a country that where that stuff doesn't happen, you're not going to. How are you supposed to know? Is all I can
Yeah,
think
you're
of.
right. That's also true. If you have grown up in a way where that's not even an issue in the first place, you wouldn't be like, I'm ready for anything. You're just like,
Yeah.
I'm used to what I grew up with, and now I have to learn a whole new way of doing things. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I honestly, this episode is probably the episode that has made me the most homesick for Japan.
I know it did that for me as well. The thing is, it's really difficult to articulate.
Hmm.
That's the thing is, it's just so difficult to articulate because there is nothing like it in European society that I can think of. There just isn't anything quite like it. You can kind of say it's like, oh yes, people going for picnics and stuff, and people go, well, that sounds like fun. It's like it's just being there and seeing it. You have to do it in order to completely kind of go, wow, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
It's 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 the scale of it. It's how impressive it is. How
Hmm.
many flowers there are on the trees. It's just they're laden with these flowers, and it's just nothing else quite like it. I can't think. I mean, the only thing in Britain that's sort of like maybe is maybe the bluebells, as far as I can say. You know, and the thing is, that these trees are tall. You can see them from a long distance away. There's
Hmm.
just the only kind of tree that I can think of in Britain that you look at from a long distance away and go, "Oh, that's that kind of tree." Is a magnolia tree.
Hmm.
That's the only one you notice in that same sort of way, but it isn't as impressive. It's
Right.
beautiful, but it's not as impressive.
No, the sakura
It's
is really
yeah,
impressive because it takes over the entire tree. Like it really
yes,
does. It's not like mostly leaves and then a couple flowers. It's like the whole tree is flowers. It's all
mm,
flowers with a small amount of leaves. So that's why I think it
yeah,
is so like it really does grab your attention because you so rarely see a tree that is literally nothing but flowers.
yes,
Like
yes.
it's really so beautiful and mesmerizing, and I
Mm,
really do miss it. There is something that is so fun and exciting about it that, like you said, there really isn't anything in the West that even comes close to what that experience is like.
no, no, and even the photographs don't do it justice.
Yeah, I mean it kind of gives you an idea of the awe factor of it, of like
Mm,
how impressive it is, but it's not until you're there in person that you feel like the environment of the people. You feel like how
Yes.
excited people get, and it feels like a festival. It really does. It
Yes.
has that feeling of like we're
Well, it
out
is a
here
festival.
celebrating because it is a festival. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
um,
It feels like one because it is one.
yes.
Seems, nay, it is. My Hamlet quote, the only one I can do.
Oh
Sorry.
man. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today on our little nostalgia trip. I love Hanami so much, so it was really fun getting to talk about it. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave it on whatever way that you are listening to this podcast, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it may be, or on YouTube. We're also on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to reach us directly, you can also send us a tweet. We're on Twitter at Passport NECESS1. We're very excited. In a couple weeks, we should have some interviews coming out. We have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
really fun new ideas, so I'm excited. I can't wait
Yes.
to do it. Um,
Neither can I, actually.
but thank you so much for listening to us, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Well, bye.